And let's get started. The headlines are that there's apparently 89 completely new functions, but I think that number really undervalues what's gone on here, because a lot of the time the value is in finding new functionality or improvements that don't require new functions, so that you don't have to learn new things, things that just get better or can do have new capabilities. And there's a lot of those as well. Some of those are performance improvements. Some of them that I'm particularly like are improvements in internal consistency, because in the end, the goal of the Wolfram language is to have an all-in-one platform for all kinds of technical computing. And so we don't want that just to be a toolbox of random functions. We want things to be able to work together, because then you actually get greater than the sum of the parts. And there's also some new external integrations as well for fitting with the outside world. The first one, and this for me has been the number one, even though it's very small, the number one feature for writing code is when you've got large blocks of code and you say, okay, we've got G1 as a random graph. Where do I use that? Well, now whenever you click on a symbol in a block of code within a cell in the notebook, all the other occurrences immediately light up. So what's GRP and where is it used? Well, it's assigned here and it gets used over here. And we can see immediately just by clicking on these things, the automatic light up of the uses of the functions. So we've had this notion for a long time that you can build up calculations, and let's say we've done 2 calculations here, and the next calculation is dependent on the previous result. So I would say something like % plus 1 in order to add 1 to that previous result 6. Everyone who works in the notebook probably knows this. Very convenient for just being able to quickly say that last answer and do something with it. And there's extended notation where % means 2 answers ago, and so on. It's got a flaw which can lead to notebooks that aren't a true representation or a reusable representation of what's happened. And as a simple example, if I reevaluate this last answer here, well, when I say %, I mean the last answer. Well, when I wrote it, I meant the 6. But now the last answer is the 7, even though it's below it in the notebook. So when I run % plus 1 again, it's now the non-existent 7 that refers to. So when I open this notebook again in future, this is not a true representation of what will happen. In a fresh session, we'll get 4, 6, and 7, and the source of this 8 is lost. But we have a new mechanism, and you just actually saw it, but it went by too fast to notice. So let's just delete this and start again. I'm going to type % again, but this time I'm just going to pause and let you see what pops up automatically. Now, I can carry on and doing what I did before by just typing % plus 1 or whatever to do the calculation. But instead here, I'm going to now reach over and choose which of these results am I talking about that are in this notebook. Do I mean the answer 7, which is an 8, or do I mean the 6 or the 4? Well, let's say the 6. So now we've got something that's like %, and you'll see now it's slightly smarter in that when I mouse over it, the thing it's referring to lights up, so we can see what we're talking about. And I could do the same kind of thing and do plus 1 and get 7. But this now is still pointing to that cell, not to the history, the sequence of calculations. So if I reevaluate this again, then we get the same answer every time. And even if I put something in between here, let's have 55 plus 55 in the middle here, and I reevaluate this, it still points to the same thing. So it's now a positional reference rather than a chronological reference. And all I had to do was just pause for a moment and use the mouse or the arrow keys to be able to select it. It has a whole bunch of other features, like I can convert it to the actual verbatim thing. I can roll it up with the previous inputs. I can iconize the things and put all of the code in here in an icon. But the basic idea here is we've got a positional reference. And when I save this and reopen it, it will continue to refer to that position in the notebook, not to, regardless of whether it was out 5 that created it. Minor things like entities that have typeset forms. These now, we always had the mouse over tooltip where you can see exactly what kind of entity this is, but what are the properties of a city entity? Well, now this is hooked up to the help system, so that for every entity you can get the documentation on the kinds of properties that this particular object has, what it represents, what its subclasses are, and so on, just automatically hooked up in the interface. The next one is also kind of interesting for being quite subtle in its benefit. For a long time, we've had natural language input. Like if I wanted that city, I can do control equals and type London. And when I mouse out, we get some kind of completion where it says, okay, we're assuming you mean a city, and we're assuming you mean the one in the United Kingdom. Perhaps you mean one of the other Londons or a different kind of meaning of London. And then I can accept that as an entity. So there's this new notation equal square brackets that is now a text form of inline Wolfram Alpha interpretation. So now we've got a text that I can paste into an email that will work in a text-based IDE like VS Code, and it behaves exactly as if I did control equals type 1 ounce, moused out, clicked accept, plus control equals 10.7 milligrams, moused out and clicked accept. But it's preserving it in text notation. And that works across all of those things that you can do through natural language. So here's the equivalent of doing that lookup of London that I did a moment ago. Now, the next one is sort of a kernel function, not a notebook thing, but it presents itself as an interface. So I've grouped it here. And it's a fairly general and quite nice diff functionality. So at its simplest, I can give it two expressions of certain kinds, and it can give me now a little visual presentation of what's changed. Red for deletes, greens for additions, and there's various different choices of the interface. Like I can see the before and after marked up, or I could see this as a side-by-side view, more like an IDE editor. Where this becomes really powerful is when we've got documents. So I can use that diff on some notebooks objects or some notebook files. So here I've got a couple of examples I prepared earlier. Here we go. So here's the diff object. I don't want the summary box. Let's have a look at the side-by-side. And you can see here that it's gone through that notebook, and I've got a section, a title and section, and some text. But the second version had some extra text added, and the first version had some text removed. And we can see that this something's changed in this. There's been some edit. Now here I can see that I've italicized the two, but there's a sort of more detailed view here, which is it's the report. So the report gives me a full breakdown that allows me to go into that particular section cell and see the highlighted, actually exactly what changed in that cell was the italicization, and there's details on the cell options that were added and removed. So everything is available to that diff in a really nice interface. It does three-way diffs, and there is a mechanism for being able to merge diffs or copy diffs over from objects as well. So everything's programmatic as well as being an interface.